Everything starts with a tale of a hero who, like others, destroys everything that causes suffering and seeks to heal the pain of those who need to be saved. However, every hero awaits a premature end, whether through the betrayal of someone he trusted or by falling into an enemy's trap. Once, one of these heroes was so powerful that people avoided him out of fear that he continued to save those in need at the cost of his own heart. When the world was saved on the brink of death, he prayed to the gods to grant a wish in his next reincarnation. Next, a boy named Alan wakes up with his brother screaming his name because their father is calling. This brother despises Alan for being lazy and undeserving of the comfort he has, wishing their father would be stricter with the older brother's behavior. But he believes today is the day everything will change. So Alan arrives in the throne room where his father mentions that the boy was born into the Westphalt ducal family 15 years ago, yet he never advanced past level 1. And worst of all, at the blessing ceremony held the previous day, Alan received no gift, even though every child in this world receives a gift from the gods. For this reason, Alan's father sees him as a failure who embarrasses the family name, being the heir of the Westphalt family, so he kicks his son out of the house. Outside the gates, Alan celebrates being free from such an unbearable duke after being reincarnated. Now he could follow his own path and seek the inner peace he so desired in his past life. For this, the boy wanders to the borderlands in the east of Westphalt, where he hopes for a peaceful life far from trouble, unlike his previous incarnation where people feared him. On his way to his destination, he finds a good place to rest before continuing his journey, but spots in the distance a knight named Beatrice, who is facing alone some stone dogs. She tears the beasts apart, but they quickly regenerate, leaving her companion, Lise, in danger. Beatrice asks her friend to flee, but Lise doesn't want to leave and abandon the knight alone with these beasts. Watching the scene, Alan recognizes the first princess of the kingdom of Adostella, Lise Adostella, and wonders what princess would be doing in a place like that. Then we're taken to a memory where Lise overhears the guests at a ceremony mocking Alan, the heir of the ducal house of Adostella, calling him a coward, and that Craig is surely devastated for having lost his wife and being left with his failed son. Lise rages against the men, saying Alan is a very decent boy. Faced with this memory, the boy thinks he could prevent harm from happening to the girl who defended him so much. At that moment, Beatrice takes a hard blow and falls to the ground, leaving the princess defenseless. So Alan rushes at great speed toward the danger, where Lise had already accepted death and finds it strange that all she can think of at that moment is Alan. Because of this, she calls out the boy's name before being attacked by the dogs, and at the same moment, the boy had saved the princess in time, asking her if someone happened to call his name. Lise wants to know how Alan ended up there at that moment, but the boy is busy dealing with the other beasts that are still a threat. So he charges against them and uses his divine eyes, identifying the cores that are the weak points of his enemies. Focusing on this, Alan invokes the end of the world and blossoming of 100 flowers' ability to launch several swords at the targets. With that, the threat had been defeated, but Beatrice was still in danger of losing her life. Alan recognizes Beatrice from ancient times and promises to heal her wounds, and uses a technique from the parallel paradox to completely erase the warrior's wounds, even restoring her armor. Faced with so much power, Lise asks how her friend reached this level, and he tries to hide the fact that he inherited it from a past life, while Beatrice supposes it's a gift from a level that the church itself is unaware of. As the princess buys into this idea, the boy confirms that's the case, getting rid of that for now. Next, he asks why the princess is in a place like this, and she tells him she received a divine revelation a few days ago. It wasn't any precise information, but the princess's gift said she could prevent ill omen if she paid attention to the words spoken. Through this revelation, the two were guided to Clune village on the border, but they were attacked on the way. According to Beatrice, if it weren't for Alan, the two might have been killed. Then the princess returns the question and also wants to know what Alan is doing there, but the boy prefers to talk in a carriage right behind them. Lise comments that it's broken, but Alan rebuilds the carriage using another healing light magic from the parallel paradox. Stooning with Beatrice on the horse's reins, Alan says he was expelled from the Westphalt family and also intends to go to the borders of that domain. He asks if the princess allows it, since a servant with his skills would be very useful for training. Beatrice comments that obviously he would need to be returned, considering the crown's interests, but Princess Lise decides to put her friend ahead of the kingdom, although it makes her unsuitable for royalty. As night falls, the three arrive at a village where everything is too empty and quiet, and Alan doesn't even feel the presence of monsters nearby. Beatrice points out that the team wasn't attacked after Alan joined, and the boy thinks it's because perhaps the monsters are afraid of something and are avoiding the village. However, a little further ahead, they find the villagers gathered in front of a structure from which a girl was expelled by a man. Lise recognizes this girl as the light sent to her as a sign, and her name is Akira. On the other hand, Akira has no idea who the girl speaking to her is, so the princess introduces herself, offended for not being recognized, since she showed the entire palace to the girl and even had lunch with her. Alan wants to know what this light talk is about, so Beatrice explains that it comes from a gift called Valiant, so rare that it's only given to one person in each generation, granting the power of 1,000 warriors to the bearer. In this current generation, the heroine who carries the strongest gift is Akira Kazuragi, and the revelation that Lies received was, become a guide to the light and eliminate the darkness. Soon, the group gathers to quell their hunger, and Akira reveals she was wandering aimlessly until she stumbled upon this village where a child told her she had nearly been sacrificed to the dragon residing in the mountains nearby. Thus, Akira sought details from the village chief, but he warned her not to interfere. Confronted with this, Alan speculates they allow the dragon to stay for protection, as in a small village like this, monster attacks are a matter of life or death, which would explain the abnormal absence of monsters in the region. Akira agrees with the boy's assumption and soon reveals she instructed the girl who was offered as a sacrifice to hide in a cave nearby until everything was resolved. However, now that she's had her fill and there's nothing interesting in this place, Akira decides to slay the dragon once and for all and calls on those who wish to accompany her. Alan considers the possibility that the villagers may not want to rid themselves of the dragon and that killing it could cause a conflict, but Akira promised to help the child, and that's what she's going to do. After the heroine departs, Lise and Beatrice decide to join her, and eventually Alan follows suit because he doesn't want to enjoy peace and tranquility on the frontier while his friends are in danger. Just in front of the mountain where the dragon resides, Akira gathers the group to devise a strategy. She will approach the peak via the main road, while the rest will circle around from behind to surround the creature. Alan questions whether it wouldn't be better for him to go in front instead of Akira, but the heroine refuses his request, sensing that the boy is the type to handle things on his own. Alan downplays it, saying he's being overestimated, but Akira insists that the boy is no ordinary person, leaving everyone looking at him with a question mark. Finally, Akira reveals that she intends to throw down with the boy, but only after defeating a dragon. Then she sets off ahead following her strategy and urges the rest of the people to hurry, or else she'll take down the beast alone. With everyone aware of their roles, the trio scales the mountain slopes, and Alan worries about the princess, but she assures him she knows a thing or two about self-defense. Meanwhile, Beatrice finds it curious that the Westfelds, who pride themselves on their military might, haven't discovered a dragon within their borders. In turn, Alan believes that his old family and this dragon have some kind of connection, and therefore there has been no conflict between them. He goes further, suggesting that perhaps the village of Clume was built precisely for the purpose of offering sacrifices. With this, Beatrice agrees that maintaining an agreement with the dragon would keep the border secure, but Alan believes that is only a consequence of this relationship, and that the real purpose is much worse than that. At this moment, the dragon senses Akira's presence and attacks the heroine, who retaliates by invoking the Sovereign of Lightning. She believes this will do the trick, but the dragon emerges unscathed, mocking the human and questioning if this is some kind of joke. In response to the creature's arrogance, Akira decides not to go easy in this fight. But the dragon points out that innocent people may become victims of this crossfire, turning its head toward the small girl who was offered as a sacrifice. Akira asks how the dragon found this child, and it responds that it let her escape on purpose because its intention was never to devour humans but to enjoy seeing the despair on their faces because a dragon's life is too long not to kill time with such interesting activities. Therefore, it released the offering just to see what would happen next. Faced with this insolence, Akira fills with hatred and attacks the dragon with a final blow of celestial blue lightning destruction. Convinced she has defeated the enemy, she turns around only to see the monster unharmed and further mocking the heroine's weakness. Then it strikes the girl forcefully, claiming it's ridiculous for someone so useless to call themselves a hero. Immobilized, Akira realizes there is an abyss of power between them, while the dragon fills its mouth with fire. However, as it was about to unleash the final blow, Alan appears and tears off one of its wings. Alan stands in front of Akira to protect her and taunts the dragon, mentioning the arrogance it has shown so far, so the creature angrily advances towards the humans. Alan asks Elise to take care of the heroine and for Beatrice to take the child, then he invokes an ability called Yemen Assassin's Sword, causing enormous damage to the enemy. The creature wonders how it can be injured by a mere human with a blunt blade since it is the Red Dragon King, the living being closest to a god. Alan acknowledges that this monster is on a different level, but watching the battle between him and Akira, he believes he can win with his technique of the end of the world. However, the dragon plays dirty and uses the rest of the group as helpless shields. However, Lise motivates Alan to do what must be done, and in that moment, he remembers that he lost the ability to face people since he began to be called a failure. Still, he sees that Lise awakens a strange courage within him, so he charges at the dragon, who decides to end everyone at once. But the mysterious warrior uses the light, the supreme ability of the end of the world, and as the intense glow of the weapon pierces the creature's armor, the darkness of the sky dissipates along with the red dragon king, and its scales fall from the sky like a petal shower. Shortly after, Akira awakens and embraces the child she promised to save, while Alan reflects that saving a princess and helping a hero kill a dragon wasn't the kind of peaceful life he wanted. But when Lise extends her hand to the boy, he realizes that a small detour on the path isn't harmful. The next day, Alan wakes up startled and apologizes for having slept for too long, but Lise reassures the boy, after all, the battle against the Red Dragon King must have been very exhausting. So Alan asks where the others are, and the princess points to the middle of the field, where Akira and Beatrice are facing off in a training duel. Then Lise takes the opportunity to explain her ability to heal people that she demonstrated earlier. However, Alan mentions hearing stories about a miraculous saint who heals any illness or injury at the doorsteps of homes in need, expressing surprise that it's the princess. Nevertheless, to him, whether she's a princess or a miraculous saint, Lise remains just herself. With that said, an atmosphere of affection grows between the two, but Akira shouts for Alan to train with them, disrupting the intimate moment. Sometime later, the adventurers bid farewell to Akira and the little rescued girl. They invited the heroine to join their journey, but she doesn't get along well with carriages, preferring to walk instead. Lise asks if Akira is sure she wants to stay with the child, and she responds that the two have already bonded, and besides, her family no longer exists, so returning her to the same village isn't a good idea. The little girl rejoices at this opportunity to start a new life, while Akira apologizes to Alan for the broken sword, feeling that she should have been the one to kill that dragon instead of leaving everything to the boy. Therefore, Akira feels inadequate and intends to hand over the sacred sword to someone worthy of it, which in this case is Alan. Humbly, Alan responds that he was only able to win with Akira's help, and that to the little girl by her side, Akira is the only hero that matters around there. Thus, the two bid farewell and go their separate ways without the rest of the team. In the late afternoon at the Westphalt family palace, Alan's father informs a mysterious man in a suit that the Red Dragon King was defeated when trying to lure the heroine into an ambush. The man in the suit assumes that she had the help of the saint, so the Duke realizes that there's more to it. Alan's younger brother rages over the dragon's death, lamenting that the clay dogs weren't able to eliminate the princess, promising to send a whole pack next time to avoid the risk of failure again. However, the Duke reminds them that the dragon's death caused a limitation of material, so they can't waste magical life forms. The boy thinks this thriftiness will let the princess escape, but the Duke assures that as long as the targets are within Westphalt lands, opportunities to catch her won't be lacking. However, more importantly, the Duke wants to know if that elf has been found, and the unknown man responds that there's no need to hurry because soon he'll deliver the elf's head to the noble. With the departure of the man in the suit, the Duke rejoices at the opportunity to bury these annoying god's puppets and avenge the Westphalt family. Meanwhile, in the carriage, Alan asks about a friend of Lise who is a blacksmith, and she explains that this blacksmith lives in a city not far from there called Granholm. Lise would love to ask her friend to make a new sword for Alan. He in turn is surprised to hear about cities on the border, while Beatrice asserts that their friend is a good professional despite there not being many elven blacksmiths. Then Lise apologizes to Alan for her revelation, putting him in this whole situation, and intends to give the sword as a reward. Alan accepts the gift but asks if the princess shouldn't return to the capital. She explains that she has already informed her father, besides being with Beatrice. As night falls, the group sets up a camp to sleep, and Beatrice offers to light a fire, but Alan uses his power to create fire for everyone, leaving the warrior stunned. Lise is exhausted and ends up falling asleep on her friend's shoulder, and Beatrice teases, saying they're engaged, so there's no problem with that. But Lise makes it clear they're no longer engaged and she doesn't want to sleep on the boy's lap. Despite her speech, she ends up sleeping on Alan's shoulder, who realizes that this is the first moment of tranquility since he arrived in this world, and remembers that it was also a beautiful moonlit night the first time he met Lise. On that day, she found Alan on a balcony and introduced herself to him, starting a conversation about the beauty of the night. Furthermore, she reveals that she's counting on the boy from now on. After all, they're engaged, and Alan is confused by this news. The next morning, they arrive in Granholm, a place so lively that it didn't seem like a border town, according to Alan. Beatrice explains that travelers and wanderers often pass through this type of city precisely because it's on the border. Soon, they all arrive at the blacksmith's house, but it seems that the elf isn't home. Alan notices that the door is unlocked, so the girls enter and call out for their friend Noelle, while Alan admires the perfection of the craftsmanship of those weapons inside. At that moment, Lise screams upon seeing Noelle unconscious on the floor, but Beatrice assures that it's just the elf's usual heavy sleep. With that, the saint heals her friend, and the bodyguard explains that Noelle doesn't eat, drink, or sleep when she starts making a weapon, and therefore passes out from exhaustion. The princess has already asked her to take it easy with work, but she never listens. At that moment, the blacksmith wakes up and sees her friends whom she hadn't seen in so long but wants to know who the guy next to them is. So he's introduced as Alan, one of Lisa's guards who asks the elf to forge a sword for him. However, Noelle has too many orders lined up, so she doesn't have time for that. Lys is frustrated, and Beatrice understands the blacksmith's side, who grumbles that this man already has a sword. Alan shows that the weapon is broken, and the elf feels ashamed for someone so clumsy wanting to wield a weapon made by her. However, upon picking up the sword, she notices that it was used to its limit to break like that, which intrigues the blacksmith to the point of her changing her mind and agreeing to make another blade for the warrior. She asks if Alan wants a sword that surpasses the sacred sword, simply the most powerful weapon she could produce. After all, only a few people are capable of wielding such equipment, and Noelle believes Alan is one of those people. With that said, the boy has no reason to refuse, so Ferreira prepares to start the work by pushing all the visitors out. Alone inside the house, the elf remembers Vanessa, a blacksmith she greatly admired in her childhood, and immediately promises to produce a weapon that will surpass the sacred sword. As she leaves, Lys hopes that Noelle doesn't overdo it with work, and Alan suggests that the group find an inn to stay in while waiting for the sword to be ready. Nearby, a woman reveals herself and intends to report what she's seeing. Soon she tells the man in the suit that the saint was seen with her bodyguard and another warrior, and the man is surprised because he thought the princess would only be accompanied by Beatrice, so he plans to investigate the matter. Meanwhile, at a nearby inn, Alan asks what they're going to do during these days, and Beatrice recommends that he do what he's always wanted, relax and not worry. However, Lys suggests he visit the Adventurers Guild to sell the items the dragon dropped, and Alan thinks it's a good idea to cover the hotel expenses. With that decided, the girls decide to take a stroll around the city in Alan's absence. With the boy gone, Beatrice questions whether the two of them alone will really be able to handle this matter, but Lys prefers not to involve Alan in it. Shortly after, the warrior finds the guild and shows the dragon scales he looted, and the receptionist is impressed to have such a rare item on the counter. Unsure of what to do, she takes some and rushes to speak to the manager, leaving Alan empty-handed. At that moment, the man in the suit takes advantage of the situation to approach Alan and ask for details about the dragon's scales the boy is carrying. Seeing his lack of manners, the man takes off his hat and introduces himself properly as Horace, along with his friend Mylena, a rare Amazon to be found in these lands. Horace explains that he never tires of hearing adventurers' stories, so he wants to know if Alan obtained these dragon scales alone. In turn, the boy mentions that he had the heroine's help, and Horace becomes intrigued by this conversation, but the attendant returns at that moment, claiming to have assessed the value of the scales. Alan looks back at the mysterious man, but he had disappeared along with his companion. Outside, Horace comments to Mylene that he never imagined that the man accompanying the princess is just a useless person without talent, but the Amazon feels something in that young man that bothers her a lot, although Horace thinks he is not a problem. Days later, the trio returns to Noelle's blacksmith hoping the sword is ready, but once again she was passed out on the ground. After being healed, Noelle points to the most powerful weapon she could forge, and as Alan wields the blade, he is sure it's a great sword. Noelle wants to test the weapon right away, but Lys warns that she won't be healing the elf all the time. Still, the blacksmith chooses to accompany the boy because only by observing the sword will she know if any adjustments are needed. Alan notices the girl's perfectionism and asks why she decided to be a blacksmith. She questions if it's strange for an elf to have this profession, and Alan believes it is because of the characteristics of the race's talent, and that's why dwarves are usually more suited to it. Then Noelle reveals that she was raised by a dwarf and doesn't know where she was born or who her parents are, but only remembers being in an unknown place, wandering aimlessly, until she was rescued by Vanessa. Vanessa was persistent, clumsy, and stubborn. She never wanted to teach Noelle how to make a sword, but she was still an important master for the elf. But instead of finishing the story, Noelle says it doesn't matter and runs away to avoid exposing herself so personally. So Horace takes advantage of the opportunity to appear once again, commenting that you would love to hear more stories like that when they return to the city. Alan notices that there's something strange about this man and this Amazon, but before the conversation evolves, Noelle hurries the boy to continue with the sword test. The elf observes Horace and thinks he's someone she knows, but she soon gives up the idea. As they move away, the man in the suit comments to Mylene that probably that boy didn't pry into their affairs, so he asks the Amazon to keep an eye on Alan so he doesn't uncover the secret. Returning to the warrior, he tests the sacred sword, and after defeating some creatures with it, He is satisfied with the blade, so Noel borrows the weapon and reveals her talent, an ability to see conditions invisible to normal eyes in this type of weapon. So analyzing the angle, speed, and impeccable position with which Alan wields the sword, she is sure that her vision of him was correct as being the ideal user of the sacred sword. Still, she finds it interesting to see how the boy fares against a stronger monster, so she calls him to continue on the path ahead. Venturing deeper into the forest, they arrive at a place where Noel swears there have always been many monsters, but since it's empty, she supposes they are afraid of Alan's presence. However, the boy is sure it's not fear of him, but of something else nearby. So he casts a spell that disperses the fog, revealing a huge wolf that terrifies Noel, reminding her that it was this creature that swallowed Vanessa. Faced with this, she stammers in fear until she asks Alan to use the sacred sword and end the wild beast. Hey folks, we're kicking off the new anime season, and if you enjoyed this anime and want to see more of it, go ahead and hit that like button down below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We need your support to reach our goal of 70,000 subscribers. Every subscription counts and helps us grow our community. Catch you next time.